All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Partnership Connections podcast. This is our podcast centered around child welfare training and educational topics through Rhode Island College and the Rhode Island Department of Children, Youth, and Families. Our goal with this podcast is to help support those already working in or with an interest in working in child welfare. My name is Stan Brazier, and I am the project director for the Learning Partnership between the Rhode Island Department of Children, Youth, and Families, or DCYF, and Rhode Island College. Our desire is to bring information from experts on a variety of topics, all at no cost to hardworking professionals and others. Today, we'll be talking about how trauma impacts the LatinX community. This is an issue that we all need to pay attention to. Some of the latest data from the U.S. Census shows about 17.6% of the Rhode Island population identified as Hispanic or Latino in July of 2022. That's up by nearly 24,500 people, or 13% jump from the 2020 census. Many of us have heard about the challenges facing those that have migrated from Latin America, yet research shows that those identifying as Latinx are less likely to seek mental health services than non-Latinx whites. Our guest today is Jennifer Gaviria. Jennifer is a school social worker in Woonsocket Public Schools. She's an adjunct faculty at Rhode Island College and also the co-founder of the Latino Mental Health Network of Rhode Island. The mission of the Latino Mental Health Network is to recruit and retain aspiring and current Latinx/multilingual mental health providers by providing support and professional development. Jennifer, it's great to have you and welcome.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, of course. So I also wanted to kind of mention too that I think that given our current, the current landscape of everything that's going on in our country, this is a particular of importance for everyone. So thank you again for doing this. But I thought maybe you could kind of just tell us a little bit about the Latino Mental Health Network and a little bit more about yourself to kick us off.
Yes, definitely. And again, yes, I think this is perfect timing for this topic. So again, thank you for inviting me. Yeah, so the Latino Mental Health Network of Rhode Island started in about 2017. It was co-founded between myself and Sandra Victorino. She is also in the mental health field. And it really started off as a community initiative. We saw that many Latino, Latinx, bilingual mental health providers were really isolated and didn't feel really supported where they were, or they felt like they were the only one, especially that they had to do a lot of interpreting and just felt like they had an added responsibility to the community, and that was really heavy. So we decided that we really wanted to provide a space for people to connect and not feel alone. And we started doing networking events, and people showed up. And as they showed up, we asked them, what do you need in the community? What do you see are the needs? And they told us, okay, we want more trainings. So we did more trainings. They also felt like they needed more self-care events. So we did some mindfulness hikes. And we also share a lot of resources, job opportunities, professional development. And it really has just grown from there. And we continue to hold these events. We try our best to do it quarterly. And we are also on Instagram. So we share a lot of resources on Instagram as well. But it really is to support people that are doing the work, or if they're interested in becoming a mental or behavioral health provider. So sometimes students will join the events, and then organic relationships happen, some mentorship relationships happen, or job opportunities are offered when people join our events.
That's awesome. So the network has expanded, and you've found a community where maybe you were not quite sure if you would find a community, right?
Exactly. And we weren't sure how many people would show up, but it definitely has grown, and we hope it continues to grow. And really just offer that support for people doing the work, because this is hard work. And many times the clinicians are the only ones in the organization that are Latino or Latinx or working with the community or Spanish speaking. And that can be very isolating. So we want to let people know, we're here for you. We want to support you. And those people that want to start that journey, we want to help connect them to different resources as well.
Cool. So I think that's a really good I think network for professionals too, that you, like you said, those that are doing the work. So what could you maybe share with people that are working, that maybe are not a part of the Latino Mental Health Network already, that are working with kids and families? And just maybe just start by defining like the term Latinx, who would identify themselves as Latinx, and then
Mhm.
also like what your definition of trauma is, and how it relates to the Latinx, different Latinx communities and populations.
Yeah, thank you for asking that. So the first thing I will say is that Latinx is really the gender neutral term utilized to refer to people from Latin America or Latin American descent. So if someone comes from a Latin American country, but if you are working with a family, I would ask them how they want to be identified as. They might say Latino, they might say, their country of origin. So really ask them what they want to be referred as. But, in academia or, in different settings, professional settings, we refer to Latinx because we want to use a gender neutral term so that people feel more included.
And
So,
just to jump in real quick here too, just for geographical purposes, when we say Latin or Latin American, are
mhm.
we talking Mexico all the way down through South America that
Yes.
encompass all of Latin America?
Yes.
Okay.
And not everybody is Spanish speaking in Latin America, right? So Brazil, and there's a few other countries that speak other languages. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you have to be Spanish speaking. It's more about geography. So yes, thank you for clarifying that. And then I know your other question was how to define trauma. So when we talk about trauma, we really are talking about an emotional response to a distressing event or experience that overwhelms an individual's ability to cope. And this could affect the person's mental, emotional, or physical well-being. And these events can be physical and or emotional harm. It could also be witnessing violence, natural disasters. It could be a car accident or different types of accidents. It could even be a loss of a loved one or a divorce. So that is the definition of trauma. But there is a difference between trauma and PTSD. So a person might experience a traumatic event. It doesn't mean they're going to be diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder. Now, post-traumatic stress disorder is a diagnosis. It's a mental health diagnosis. And in order to get that diagnosis, you do have had to experience that trauma or have witnessed somebody else experience it. But not everybody, again, is going to develop PTSD.
Okay, got it. So, and one of the things I mentioned, like in the intro, is that there tends to be this lack of seeking help from Latino or Latina individuals, right? As opposed to, say, non-Latinx whites. Why might that be the case? And how might trauma look differently for those from different Latinx communities?
Yes. So there's, so when I'm talking about the Latinx community, I'm going to make a lot of like generalizations. So I'm going to say more likely that this might be their experience, but again, each family is going to be different, right? But we know that cultural beliefs, values, and norms also influence how trauma is experienced and expressed. And we also know that different kind of risk factors for the Latinx community can exacerbate the impact of traumatic experiences. So those are immigration status, language barriers, acculturation stress, which is how the person has assimilated being in this country, discrimination, a history of discrimination, and historical trauma. So those can all make those symptoms worse. We also know that, as you mentioned, that people are less likely to seek help. And some of those reasons are people might be uninsured or underinsured. There might be a language barrier. There's also a cultural stigma. So a lot of times, and again, it's not going to be every family. So we don't want to make those assumptions, but it's just something for us as clinicians to kind of have in the back of our heads of, okay, this might be happening. There is that culture that, you clean your dirty laundry at home. You shouldn't, air it out to others. There's also a lot of mistrust of institutions. This might be because of, maybe back home in their country of origin, maybe there was a lot of corruption in the government. So that creates a sense of mistrust. Or if they've had certain experiences here of discrimination, that could also build mistrust. And then there could be some transportation barriers. But again, this really varies because the Latinx community is such a big community. And within it, there are people that are documented and some people are undocumented, right? So that's going to change how they view mental health care. There's also people that recently immigrated to the United States, but there's people that have been here for a lot of generations too. So we want to ask people, how do they identify, and also what is their history, right? What is their country of origin? How long have they been here? We don't want to directly ask people, are you documented or undocumented, especially during this time that people are very afraid, but we can get some information about their history in indirect ways that can help us figure out how we can help them best.
How often, in your experience in working with Latinx individuals in Rhode Island, they experienced a real genuine fear of having to return to their country of origin because of safety concerns?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it really depends, right? And here in Rhode Island, we have a wide variety of people from different countries. Like some people are from Venezuela, some people are from Dominican Republic, some people are from Puerto Rico, Mexico, Central America. So it really depends on their country of origin. And even within the same country, there is such diversity, right? Some people are from very remote areas and some people were from the city. So I even see that, when working with kids, some people, went to school. Some of them went to bilingual schools. They come here and they're ready, but some of them didn't have any education. So it's so diverse. So you really want to kind of ask questions again in like an indirect way of just what is their history, where they lived, what did it look like, that type of thing. We don't want to make assumptions. And sometimes I ask, what town is it that you're from? I don't want to just know the country. I want to know which town, and I'll Google it because I want to know, what's going on politically. And, even like from Puerto Rico, I have some families that would not want to go back to Puerto Rico because there is a lot of violence where they are. But there are some families that want to be there. There's some kids that want to be there because they want to be with their families. So it really, really is very diverse. And that's why we have to ask questions and kind of dig deeper to figure out what their experience is.
In your experience, when you have heard that, is it difficult for people to be forthcoming about the fear of, say, gang violence or political corruption or whatever the case might be, that they're fearing their own safety of having to return to their country? Is that difficult for them to be forthcoming about, to say, like, I really don't want to go back to country X because I'm at risk, or I genuinely believe I'm really at risk, or my family's at risk if I go back?
Yeah, there are some people that have said that to me. There's also some people that have said, there's just not a lot of opportunity for me and my family. I'm not going to have a job. I might not have food to eat. I find that that's a little bit more common than the other reasons, but maybe it's because they don't want to be forthcoming about that. I don't know. But it definitely has been a mix in my personal experience.
Right. One of the other things you mentioned too was a lack of trust in institutions. So this is, I think, a big one, right? When you're talking about child welfare and having to have a institution come into your life, a system, a large system,
Mhm.
government system, right? That comes in. But I think that there is a lot of good that can be done by that system and support that could be done, even if the reason for involvement might not be so good. So, what's kind of your advice for anyone working in the child welfare system or even some state contracted providers that are in these like family support serving systems to, take a trauma informed care approach and build trust so that like you can kind of try to mend some of those fences in between and barriers in between where there's like a lot of lack of trust already because of different people's experiences and lack of trust in institutions and systems.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think, at least in my experience, well, first of all, just, having an outside agency being involved or in the home is already going to cause a lot of stress, right? But if they, depends on which country they're from, they might not have come from a country that has a system like DCYF, right? So for them, that's new. They might not understand why, right? Because maybe in their country of origin, physical punishment is the norm and that it might not be a cause to remove a child from the home. So, really explaining to them how the system works here is going to be important to build trust. Trying to make sure that you have interpreters, that you don't have children doing the interpreting is going to be very important. It's also a liability issue, but it's important to not create those power dynamics within the family if a child is translating. So making sure that if a translator is needed or interpreter is needed, that you have that person present and explaining what the process will look like. So not just why are they there, but okay, so I know sometimes we may not have the answers, but giving information about the different options, right? Or possible outcomes, I think would be also helpful because it's going to add more anxiety if they don't know. And for them, it might be very foreign to have, people involved in the home in this way and explaining how the department could be helpful. How could they help? Like if they share certain things, how could they help them as well?
What would also maybe be some advice that you could give or think of around encouraging both the helping professional and the family to make sure that they don't have to feel as if they're just in a compliance based, that they just have to say yes to everything because it is an institution and like you said, they're not used to it, they're unfamiliar with it, and they don't really most people, right, don't really want to have that involvement, so they might just say yes. But I know the system's trying to move away from having it be not be compliance based and having there be more involvement and inclusion and family voice, and there's an empowerment piece and participating and trying to change behaviors and things like that. What would be your advice to like both the professional and the family to make sure that like they have rights, they don't maybe necessarily, it's not about just saying yes to everything just because, or it's important that you ask your own questions and advocate for yourself. So what would you kind of maybe say to some of that?
Yeah, I mean, if I think again, if it's a family that maybe is newer to the country, they might need a little more guidance. But again, really depends because one value that is very common in the Latino or Latinx community is respect, respeto, right? In Spanish. Although not everyone speaks Spanish, but that's okay. So especially with authority figures, so they might just say yes to everything to comply. So really explaining to them the process and that they do have a voice. And it might take, more than once to really explain things because there is that sense of, I'm going to do this because this is an institution. And it can be a little bit interesting because externally it might look like they're complying, but internally there is also that mistrust. So it's like these mixed feelings, right? So really trying to build the relationship and trying to have, someone maybe from the community as much as possible. If they're already working with other providers that they trust, including them, right? Maybe it's a doctor, or maybe it's in the school, or maybe it's a therapist that is also included because they already built the relationship with them. And if you have the more people that are sending the same message, I think would be helpful.
In terms of, the unfortunate event that a child does have to be removed from the home, what maybe is some of the strategies, or again, like it, for lack of a better word, advice, like how important it, and I know we're talking, speaking in broad strokes here, the importance of family, if family member can kind of step in and be a kinship caregiver provider, how important is that? What are some of the key considerations to take in when, if there other family members that are here that can step in and kind of take some responsibility? What are some important things to keep in mind when trying to engage with like extended family members, and like what is the importance of family, and again, broadly speaking, in terms of Latinx cultures and communities?
Yeah. So again, it depends. I feel like that's my keyword or phrase because there's such diversity in the families. And I know if sometimes when people immigrate here, they might not have immediate family members, but sometimes friends become like family, or they might be like a great aunt or something like that. And the children might call these people cousin or aunt, and they really aren't. But
Right.
because they don't have their families here, they become so close. So I think that's just something to consider. That's it. That might be important for some families that I've seen, but I do think that it is really important if, whether it's that extended family that might be able to take care of the child, or it might be someone that is a friend, but they really are close and they call them family, considering them as well. And sometimes I've also seen like there be really close relationships with pastors or people that they might know from like a church or something like that, that might help as well in finding someone that the child could stay with, or children.
And it's just important, like in terms of respect, like you were saying too, for the helping professional, it's really important to make sure that they are respecting whoever it is, even if they're not blood related to that individual family, that
Yeah.
they respect them. So in turn, that helping professional needs to make sure that they get the same amount of respect, is kind of what it sounds like too.
Yes. Yes. And not saying like, oh, but they're not really your
They're
cousin.
not really
Because
your family, or why
they,
would you give it, let
yeah,
your child stay with that person or something like that.
right,
And to
right.
remember that that individual respects that person and it's important and it considers them to be like family, right? So,
Exactly.
okay.
Exactly.
Important.
Yes.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Gotcha. And then, because of, the current landscape, what are maybe some key things to kind of keep in mind when working with undocumented families, or families, even families, I'm sure, dealing with a lot of uncertainty, even that have some limited immigration status, given the current, circumstances we find ourselves in.
Yes. And there is a lot of misinformation right now. I know like on social media, there's a lot of rumors of, oh, ICE is here or ICE is there, and people are hiding. So they might not, want to go out in public places right now. I know sometimes some people are scared to send their children to school. So just being mindful of that, right? Of, okay, if the child is supposed to be going to school and they're not taking them to school, like what is the reason? Because it might be that they're scared to send them to school, not that they're, being neglectful, right? And that people might not be as forthcoming about their immigration status because they're scared as well. And again, making sure that you're giving them resources that are reputable because within the Latino community, Latinx community, people use WhatsApp, people use Instagram, Facebook, and the news spreads like wildfire and it's not even accurate. So giving them resources of where places that they can go that are reputable that will be able to help them regarding their immigration status. That's what I would recommend.
Yeah, I think the example that you gave of someone keeping a child out of school for fear is a good example where we have to try to find a balance between safety, well-being, and also being respectful of individuals' experiences and cultures and fears and stuff like that. Are there any other examples you can think of where we have to really try to make sure that we toe the line between we want to, have safety and well-being, and we want everyone to be safe, but we also want to be mindful and respectful of others' cultures?
Well, I can talk a little bit about the immigration issue again. So, if someone is undocumented and they might be at risk of being deported and they're involved with the department, I think, having the conversation with them of having an affidavit of who is going to stay with the child and really understanding, like, is there a risk of this person being deported? And just having that is important as well. Obviously that's a tough conversation to have, but we do have to have it because if they are deported, it's better to have a plan in place of where can the child go, as we were talking about earlier, to identify some people that the child already knows and could possibly be safe with.
Right. Gotcha. What are some of the best resources, best organizations in Rhode Island that folks can rely on and reach out to for extra support?
I would say for immigration, I know Progreso Latino and Dorcas International Institute also have immigration clinics. I believe Roger Williams University also has an immigration clinic. I'm not 100%, but definitely Progreso Latino and Dorcas International Institute would be the best.
Awesome. And interpreter services, anyone that you would recommend or?
I believe Dorcas also has interpreters,
Okay.
But I'm not 100% sure. If people have Medicaid, they should be able to have interpreters for any medical appointments. But I wouldn't know for people that don't have the ability to pay where they would be able to get interpreters.
Okay. Jennifer, thank you. Is there anything else that you think you want to add? Any other final parting words, advice?
Well, I think the most important thing is, to recognize that we are such a diverse community and to make sure that, as you're building the relationship, that you try to dive deep, ask questions in a respectful manner, right? Because that is very important to us. But that if you met, one Puerto Rican family, you met one Puerto Rican family, right? Because everybody's so different. There might be some cultural values and norms that we all share or our language, right? Spanish, but the needs are very different. The experiences are very different. So, make sure that, you ask a lot of questions to really try to understand people's background and where they come from, and also do your research. Once you learn like what town they're from, just learn about what's going on locally. And I think that'll give you a better idea of what people have gone through as well.
Right. Right. Do your research and don't make any assumptions, right?
Yes.
I think like you said too, there are sort of these broad overviews, and different categories and different things that have, are kind of cut across different cultures maybe, but don't make assumptions. Do your research. And I know you're big on self-care too, so take care of yourself. Make sure that you're, doing what you need to do to prevent burnout and compassion fatigue and all of that, right? So,
Oh, yes, definitely. Self-care is definitely very important. And sometimes we also have to teach the families we work with about self-care as well.
right, right. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's a stressful time with a lot of uncertainty, with a lot of already trauma that has already happened, and like you said, so thank you so much. Appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you so much.